Did you know that hosting a webinar is one of the best ways to connect and communicate with users? No matter why you will be using them, you'll need to have a basic understanding of how webinars work and the best way to host them. I'm Raid, here with Jotform. Let's get into it. To host an effective webinar, here are the 6 basic steps. Set your goals, choose the right webinar software, find a good co-host, create top-notch promotional material, practice, and answer questions live. First, start by setting a proper goal for your webinar. Setting a goal for your webinar will give you and your team something specific to work toward and keep everyone on track. Ask yourself, what do I want to achieve with this webinar? Your goals can be anything from spreading awareness, increasing attendance rates, or getting more in-webinar participation. Be sure to include both big and small goals for your webinar. Since bigger goals are harder to achieve, sprinkling in a few smaller goals, more measurable goals, can be a great way of keeping your team motivated. You can build more confidence in your work, making it easier to reach your bigger goals. When you're constantly achieving something during the webinar process, you will feel significantly happier while working and want to push to reach your larger goals. Next, it's time to choose the right webinar software. There are a lot of choices in the webinar software market, which is both good and bad for a webinar host. Having options is nice, but when there are too many, it can be really overwhelming. Our advice is to focus on your needs. Don't worry about tools that have been hyped up or that look cool, and instead look at what platform provides for you the best. A good place to start is by writing out a list of things that you must have and things that are nice to have. Clearly laying out your needs will help you to stay on track. If you're still struggling to find a good webinar software, most of them offer a free trial period, so you can test them out risk-free. While finding the right webinar software is important, it's also worth investing in a powerful online forum for gathering registrations. Jotform.com is the best place to start. With Jotform, you're able to completely customize forms to your branding and images, and even connect third-party integrations like Google Sheets and PayPal. Now you've got to find a good co-host. Hosting a webinar is no easy task, which is why it's important to have a co-host that is confident and works well with you. What you consider to be good qualities of a co-host varies from person to person, which is why it's vital for you to consider what you specifically need in a co-host. Some traits to look for could be someone who is collaborative, contributes to the presentation, and provides feedback. To make sure you're on the same page as your co-host, try creating a Google Doc where both of you can write out your goals for the webinar and any important deadlines. Small things like this will ensure that the collaboration process moves as smoothly as possible. Now, let's focus on creating top-notch promotional material. This step is crucial. What's the point in creating a great webinar if no one knows about it or even comes to participate? Your promotional materials are how you will get registrants. Every team is different and has certain limitations to what they can produce, but everyone should prioritize creating these 3 emails: a promotional email, reminder email, and a thank you follow-up email. The promotional email is for your targeted list of users, the people who would most likely be interested in your webinar. It shouldn't be super complicated. Focus on including the basics, like the name of the webinar, a brief description, the date and time, as well as a link to register. This is meant to get the word out to your audience and hopefully foster some registrants. Next is the reminder email. This is helpful because it brings your webinar to the top of your registrants' minds. You will definitely want to utilize a reminder email if you're sent your promotional email months in advance, so your registrants might have forgotten about it. Reminder emails are typically sent out 1 day or even 1 hour before the webinar starts and include a brief description, the date and time, as well as the instructions on how to join. And lastly, send a follow-up email after the webinar is over and thank everybody that registered. In Jotform's follow-up emails, we also include a brief description of the webinar and a link to the recording. It's extremely beneficial to record your webinars and send them to attendees or even post them to YouTube. This allows you to generate more organic traffic, and if someone wants to come to a future webinar, they have a previous example to watch so they know what to expect. Now, it's time to practice. We all know the phrase, practice makes perfect, and it applies to hosting a webinar. It's easy to get so involved in the creation process that we forget to make time to actually run through the entire webinar to ensure there are no snags. You don't want to run into any problems during your actual webinar. It could send a negative message to your attendees and completely derail your presentation. To avoid this, practice the entire thing at least once to see that it's not too short or too long, your slides flow nicely together, and that there are no technical glitches in your demo. This allows you to go back and fix any errors before it's time for the actual webinar. And lastly, be sure to answer participant questions live. Set aside a few minutes at the end of your webinar for a live question and answer session. Having their questions answered in real time helps your participants to feel more connected to your company. And to add a more personalized touch, say the person's name along with their question when you go to answer them. When using the GoToWebinar platform, attendees can type out questions for you and the rest of the audience. That way you can easily see their name and question. Another thing to keep in mind is that if your webinar is on a more technical topic, be sure to have a member of your support team join the webinar to help answer any questions. And finally, if you run out of time, provide your attendees with a support email address so they have another way of getting answers to their questions. So, let's review. Hosting a webinar does not need to be complicated. Here are the 6 steps we outlined today in this video. First, set goals. Then choose the right webinar software. Choose a good co-host. Next, create high-quality promotional materials. Practice your webinar at least once and have some time at the end for a live Q&A session. Follow these steps and your next webinar is sure to be a big success. Thanks for watching today. I'm Raid here with Jotform. See you later.